My name is Cameron, and I'm an intern here at Battle of Musgrove Mill State Storage Site. Behind me is the Enoree River, which is going to be the focus of our program today. But before we dive into it, I'd like to give you a little bit of background information on the river itself. You see, the Enoree River is an 85-mile-long tributary of the Broad River. It borders 3 counties in South Carolina, those counties being Greenville, Spartanburg, and Union County. And the river is part of a river system that is over 1 million years old. Now, covering 1 million years of history in one video program is quite a big task. So, for this program, we're just going to focus on August of 1780. The calm and peaceful scenery of the Enoree River, as you see today, is in stark contrast to what one would have experienced during August of 1780. The river itself would have been in the backcountry of South Carolina and would have been a witness to the brutality of backcountry warfare. It was also a means of opportunity for some and a strategic advantage point for others. As you will see in our program today, we have 3 different perspectives that you will encounter. One of them is the Musgrove family perspective, as told by a miller. He will go into why the people of the backcountry settled around this area, and will also explain how a gristmill would have worked and the importance of the Enoree to power that gristmill. We will then encounter 2 soldiers. One patriot, and the other a British soldier. They will explain how the Enoree River served as a strategic advantage point during the military operations, and then we'll conclude the program with a final video. With each perspective, we will get a glimpse into how and why these different groups and individuals utilized the Enoree River during their time here. So, without further ado, come with me as we take a walk through time back to August of 1780.
Good afternoon. I am a miller, and I'm standing here on the banks of the Enoree River. The Enoree River was important in the colonial era because it provided a source of energy, a source of water, and a source of transportation. Immediately behind me is what is called a mill race. It is a man-made or man-dug canal that provided the water or directed the water to the grist mill, which was built on this location, and it provided food for the settlers in this area. And we needed a water source to operate the huge wheel. The land also in this area was very fertile for growing crops, corn, some wheat, but the grist mill was a means by which to convert that into usable product. It was also used as a commercial product. I'm standing on the site location, what would have been Edward Musgrove's grist mill around 250 years ago. You can probably see and hear the water behind me flowing through what is called a mill race. This was a man-made canal that directed the water from the main river to the grist mill. The grist mill was a structure of stone and wood. It, as well as this canal behind me, were built using various types of labor, manpower.
Before we can get into details of how the gristmill here would have operated, we need to discuss the topic of enslaved labor. It is reasonable to believe that Edward Musgrove was not the miller, but that he was just the owner of the mill. Due to the small scale of his property, he could have worked alongside his enslaved labor,
but it must be reasoned that enslaved people did the brunt of the labor here at the mill. According to Edward Musgrove's will, he owned at least 5 enslaved people by 1790. Their names were Tom, Phyllis, Judy, Kizzy, and due to the condition of the document, we are uncertain of the correct spelling of the last name, but we believe the name of the 5th enslaved person was either Lat or Bat. Besides their names, we have no other information regarding them. The will of Edward Musgrove is the only primary source we have so far that talks about them. How many enslaved people Edward Musgrove would have owned during August of 1780 is unknown to us, but it is safe to assume that he used enslaved labor at his mill. When discussing how Musgrove's mill would have operated, we cannot ignore the fact that enslaved laborers were forced to do the work here for the white populace that came to Musgrove's mill for its services. We do know, according to Musgrove's will, that after his death they were to be given to his wife and Musgrove, and after her death the 5 enslaved people, along with their children if they had any, were to be divided amongst the Musgrove children if they so wanted them. It truly would be something to get to know their thoughts on the battle that occurred here. One can only imagine how they felt when the fighting was raging, let alone truly imagine their individual day-to-day experiences as enslaved people here. Perhaps one day we might learn more about their stories. Regardless of all that we do not know, their perspective deserves to be told when discussing all the others that surrounded the Enoree during August of 1780.
Edward Musgrove, we know, had at least 5 slaves by the name of Tom, Phyllis, Judy, Kizzy, and Black. Other labor used might have been members from his family or from other settlers located nearby. On the water side of the building would have been a large water wheel, and the bottom of that wheel would have been down in the water, and the current would force the wheel to turn. That was the source of energy. In the center of that water wheel was a shaft that ran into the building. That shaft was connected to a system of gears. On the other end of those gears were 2 millstones. A bottom millstone, which was referred to as the bedstone, was stationary. It did not move. The top millstone was called the runner. It was the stone that did move. The grain from the corn and the grain from the wheat were brought to the grist mill to be ground into cornmeal and flour, the products that were used to supply food. Also, an excess of these products would have been sold commercially, so it was a source of income as well.
The Enoree and Tiger have narrow and steep valleys. Early settlers found this network of small valleys with their clear streams and fertile cane-covered bottoms unusually inviting.
With the lack of bridges, the fords along the Enoree were important to transporting supplies, soldiers, and communicating back and forth between British strongholds like 96 in Charlestown in 1780.
There was a primary ford on the Musgrove property and 2 other fords close by. A ford is basically a shallow part of the river that is easier to cross. The fords made it possible to have that desired transportation. The ford at that place was convenient for use in moving military supplies from 96 to Ferguson's new position, which was moved to the east and across the broad river to protect the left flank of the British encampment.
His property was desirable real estate for the British. The ford across the Enoree River could provide a known crossing. The grist mill on the property could provide food for hungry soldiers, and its location provided a convenient and recognizable gathering place for the British. In the effort to gain control of communication and transportation throughout the backcountry, the British took control of the ford and the mill, setting up camp around Edward's home.
Began, a group of mounted patriot militiamen led by Captain Shadrach Inman successfully lured the British forces across the Enoree and into the ambush.
Without the Enoree River, there would have been no ford crossing here.
And no grist mill.
So when you take those two important factors away, it can be argued that without the Enoree River, there would have been far less of a reason for the British force to desire the Musgrove property.
With no Tory encampment at Musgrove's mill, then perhaps there would have never been a battle here. And with no battle, who knows how that would have affected the outcome of future battles.
Like Kings Mountain.
But that's just speculation.
Today, the Enoree River is quiet and peaceful. It is no longer used to generate power for grist mills or to be a military strategic location. Today, people use it for recreational activities, just like I'm doing right here. So, come out and play. How will you use the Enoree River during your trip to Battle of Musgrove Mill State Historic Site? Will you take a kayak on the river, fish like me, or just take a nice walk around the park? No matter what you do, we look forward to seeing you here at our site. Till then, thanks for watching.